My campaign manager, Thomas McAfee, and I were talking the other day, and we were laughing about how that we hadn't spent any money on this thing. We weren't even talking about running for governor yet. I'm winning the polls, and other people have spent a ton of money on this.
Hello, everyone. This is Brandon Lewis, founder of the Tennessee Conservative, our state's largest conservative news alternative. Today, we are joined with Congressman Tim Burchett, who's going to explain to us the recent events surrounding the continuing resolution and what we can expect as Trump comes into the White House and as we usher in all of our newly elected officials and see what the makeup of Congress is. Mr. Burchett, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, brother. You can call me Tim.
Tim, all right, makes it easier. So, as you know, our publication is largely state focused. Like I keep up a little with federal, but because I volunteer, I
Sure.
can't watch it like you can and others do. So, tell us, with grassroots conservatives being, on our list and folks that are focused, tell us about what we just witnessed in DC, because we're getting a lot of information from the mainstream press, most of which you can't trust. And then we're getting, lots of information from leadership, which I've learned over the years may come at you, sometimes not exactly completely where it needs to be. So, as conservatives looking at this, kind of tell us what happened, why conservatives voted against it, why so many Democrats voted for it. Break it down for us.
Yeah, well, um, I wouldn't trust the mainstream media as far as I could throw the dome off the Capitol, but they all have an agenda, and that agenda is to make us think that Joe Biden was a great choice for president. They got so much invested in him, they'll wreck this country. But what we voted on is called a CR, a continued resolution. And I always tell the folks in my office, we don't use initials here. I just, you got to spell it out. And it's called a continued resolution. And in that, it is a continuation of the current spending policies. So what we have in reality is a continuation of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer's spending policies and programs that were implemented during COVID with that incredible influx of your hard-earned dollars from your grandchildren, really, is what we're borrowing, or great grandchildren. And what they did was they passed a continued resolution, and America has demanded that we have single issue spending bills like we do in Tennessee. We gripe a lot about what's going on maybe at the Capitol in Tennessee, but the reality is they pay their debts, they have very little debt, and they have single issue spending bills. So there's nothing hidden in there. And so what this was, they said it's a clean CR, but within that CR there was a 5 billion, over 5 billion for submarines. There was 100 million for Coast Guard. There was funding of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. If you remember that bridge, it was hit in Maryland. It was hit by a cargo ship, or barge, or whatever you want to call it. Well, dadgummit, they had insurance, but yet we're funding it. We're doing it again, and in one of the previous bills, it was in there twice. So I don't know. Are we funding it three times? This is what happens when you rush. When I was in the legislature, we had a saying, and it was, we'll go a little slower. We're going to get there a little faster. And I said, dadgummit, let's just stay till Christmas Day if we have to. My father, these guns behind me, were taken off of dead Japanese soldiers that he actually killed. He missed four Christmases, and he volunteered to do that in the Pacific in the Second World War in the Marine Corps. And he didn't have any regrets about that. Hated being away from his family, but he had a job to do. And I'll guarantee you, Daddy wasn't getting paid $174,500 and all the perks that go along with it. And it was 120 degrees, and people were shooting at him. It's not 120 degrees in Washington, and currently people are not shooting at me currently. But I say that, but I guess the thing is we funded government, and everybody's cheering that we funded government. But there was a lot of misinformation out about that. We're going to cause veterans to go without, and actually it was in the middle of their pay, so they would get paid. I think it's mid-January. So they've already been paid for this month. So, and also the law is pretty clear that you can't lose their house because of inability to pay during a shutdown, things like that. And that's why I have legislation that says if we don't do our job, if we don't pass a budget, then they cut part of our pay. It never goes anywhere. I propose it. Both parties say, yeah, 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 and then they don't ever let it see the light of day. So we went through three changes. The first change was the one everybody flipped out about. They said there's a $40,000 pay increase in there. There was money for Washington, D.C. for a stadium. All those that was wrong. That was completely wrong. There was a cost of living increase, $4,000 to $6,000. Actually, we were getting rid of the stadium. Government doesn't need to own stadiums. So I think the last time that was probably the first time that was done was the Roman Coliseum, and we all know how that ended up.
Yeah, well, we did it with the Tennessee Titans Stadium. That seems to be real popular, even though 60% of Tennesseans say it's a bad use of money. The Republicans shoved that through and smile about it all the way.
Yeah, and I voted against the original. I voted against. There was about three or four of us that voted against that. They even had a betting thing going on in the Governor Sundquist's office at that time, kind of a ball board to see when I would fold, and I never did. So I just think if the millionaires think it's that and billionaires think it's that great of a deal, why didn't they just put all their hard-earned dollars into it and leave the taxpayers out of it? Wall Street Journal did an article on stadiums, and you can research it if it's still out there. It basically said you're going to sell a little more beer, and a few people are going to have jobs with those foam fingers and selling crappy hot dogs, and a little more gasoline. But the reality is, it's just it doesn't do a whole lot for your local economy overall. If you consider the investment, because you never get them paid off, and then they blackmail you and say we're going to go somewhere else, like they did us, like they did Houston to come here. So anyway, that bill that we passed, it did all those things, and there's probably more in there that I can't remember. But the interesting thing was Trump wanted wanted it in there that they couldn't that they could the debt limit, he could go over the debt limit, and they didn't give him that, and that's the one we passed. Oddly enough, 34 Republicans voted against it. And the Democrats, interestingly enough, they whipped it, and that's a beltway term. And what they did was they got on the House floor and they talked about how awful it was. They whipped against it, I guess I should say. Every one of them. You saw the lady with the purple hair, who's the ranking member, DeLauro, I think's her name, out I think New York. The ranking member of the Appropriations Committee did their bidding on that and saying how awful it was. Every dadgum Democrat except one, I think one passed, present but not voting, they voted for the thing. So that ought to tell you something. We've got to quit with these CRs. We have one duty as congressmen, and that's one constitutional duty, and that's pass a budget. We haven't done that in over 30 years. I've been there 6 years. I was on the budget committee when I first got there. I'm kind of sort of a budget hawk. Maybe I'm not as eloquent as some, but I was kind of fired up about being on that committee because I thought we'd do something, and we didn't. We've never, and that's why I asked to be taken off that committee. So we've had pretty much a run of it, and that's it in a nutshell, I guess I should say. And we'll
Well,
be
whenever
back.
I see a bunch of Democrats voting and then some Republicans voting and then the conservatives voting in a separate block, it always makes me, usually I would be in that little group of people saying, no, this is not what my constituents sent me up here to do. No, this is not the proper way to do it. And I appreciate you and others standing on principle on this, because it is very difficult to be conservative in a Republican caucus. And the two things are not the same. We see it here at the state level as well. We've got a handful of folks that are like, if the people don't want it, we're not voting for it. And then everybody else is like, well, what do the lobbyists say? What's leadership say? Or how high am I going to have to climb,
Yeah.
et cetera? Is that going to hurt my campaign contributions? And so I'm excited to see. Were you the only one in the delegation, or was also a no?
I believe Andy and Desjardins as well. I believe Desjardins. I believe
Okay.
that's. But yeah, the thing you got to remember on all this is that the Doge group or whatever, they said they're going to cut $2 trillion. That's their goal. And that's pretty lofty, but you got to realize every 100 days we add another $1 trillion to the debt. We are at that limit, that level. And in 5 to 6 years, the biggest single the biggest single line item will be our interest on our debt. That's just money. You might as well just, y'all are down there in Nashville, you might as well shovel it out going down West End out of the back of a pickup truck. You'd probably get more for it, or Kingston Pike in Knoxville. So I think we are just about to go over that cliff, and that scares me. I don't know what that is. The so-called economists tell you it's okay to run up debt, but Dave Ramsey will tell you debt is dumb, and I'm a believer of that. And we need to quit. This is money we could be invested in infrastructure, schools, teachers, military, what have you. Well, that's another thing. If I could, I'm sorry, I just remembered.
Go ahead.
We gave that money to the Coast Guard and then the submarines or the sub bases. It'd be interesting to see where whose district all that spending goes into, because that generally tells you a whole lot about it. And 2 weeks ago, we passed the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act. Once again, the war pimps, I get in trouble every time I say that, but that's what they are. They're just pimping war. They're just going to get kids killed, young boys and girls. And every year they failed their audit. I believe this is the 7th or 8th time they failed an audit, didn't pass an audit. And what did we do? How did we punish them? We gave them $9 billion new dollars. And then they come back 2 weeks later and say, hey, we need $5 billion for submarines. We need $100 million for the Coast Guard. And one of the bills I saw where it had I think around $100 million for the Air Force and the Army to do research. It didn't say what they were researching, but I just think that's what accepted, and that's what's considered a lean budget. And I hope, and I told on my Twitter account at X, I guess I should say, it had over 1 million views. But I said when we were with Elon and Vivek, and everybody was patting themselves on the back and cheering. And I said the problem's not going to be with those two guys. It's going to be with the congressman in that room, because they've got no guts. And they'll come home and say all the great things they're doing, but it's up to us being the population to research what the heck's going on and get on that little computer. Get your grandkids to show you how to check somebody's voting record, and I think you'll find that it's not what it seems. We pass these multi-billion or trillion, as this is over $1 trillion, and we're not really sure. And we did it with just very little time. And people say, well, you had 100 pages. You got 10 staff members to you could break it down into whatever. They could do it all within, if they had an hour, we could cover it all. But the problem is you got to be about a Philadelphia lawyer to figure out, because it's subsection this, and you go chase it over here and you chase it back over there. And they're very crafty in the way they do those things.
Well, it aggravates me that legal language isn't written so that it can be understood. Tennessee does a little bit better job than the federal government. And then further, if you've got all this time, I mean, that's just dysfunction in business or anything else. When you get up to the deadline and you're like, you don't even have a plan, and it all gets crammed through last minute. That's poor leadership.
The plan. That is the plan. That is always the plan with these clowns, both parties. And now I've got a new saying. Say you've heard it first here. I call them the tarmac boys. The tarmac boys. What that is the people that are always going to be out greeting the president or the heads of state or whatever. Those are the ones you'll always see out there. They don't look like me or you, brother. I can tell you that. I've been in office. Let's see, I was county mayor for 8 years. I was in the state legislature before that for 16, 4 years in the House and 12 in the Senate. I've been in Congress for 6 years. And I have yet to be invited out on a tarmac to greet a head of state at the airport. And so I tell you better watch this stuff. Watch the folks that are going to surround Trump now in Congress and playing that game, because they'll vote. The Doge committee in the House will vote for all these great cuts, and guess what? The one in the Senate will vote for some cuts too. But those might not mesh, and that's part of the plan. get it caught down in the mire and the sewer, that it's not a swamp. Swamp is a cool little ecosystem God created. I hunted and fished around swamps my whole life, frog gig. This is a sewer, man. It all flows in and it stinks. It stinks because it's just like in a sewer, you have what's called anaerobic decomposition. It's the absence of oxygen and light, and that's where you get that awful smell. And that's what it's from. And we need to remember that.
Here's the story. We need money. I'm looking at the bank account, and if we are going to take Adelia to Nashville, we are going to have to step it up from a contribution level now. With all that having been said, I know many of you are sending in mailed checks. The U.S. Postal Service has been a wreck. Our mail is gotten out late. I've sent out, like, I don't know, between both of my businesses, somewhere around 12,000 pieces of mail in the last 30 days. And it has taken forever for the mail just to reach me. I mean, it used to be 2 or 3 days for first class mail. Now it's like a week and a half, 14 days. It's ridiculous. So guys, if you're sending it in, maybe do it online to get here a little quicker. And you can go to TennesseeConservativeNews.com/support. You can go to P.O. Box 625, Signal Mountain, Tennessee 37377. That's Signal Mountain, Tennessee. P.O. Box 625 37377. We really need it. It would be great to have one conservative reporter up at the Capitol to tell you what's going on, so that we're not just relegated to watching the videos. The Tennessee Holler is there. The Democrats support their news outlet, and conservatives should support ours. And we've got folks like Phil Williams and every other liberal reporter across the state, Democrats almost to a person. We need somebody, just one. I'm going to say we got just one, right? Sometimes the Lord's like, just one is enough. The Lord and just one. And so if we can just send one up to Nashville, that would be awesome. TennesseeConservativeNews.com/support. If you give $50 or more, or a recurring donation of $10 or more, we will send you a proud Tennessee Conservative tumbler, a koozie, a couple of bumper stickers, my heartfelt thanks, and a directory of your state elected officials on the GOP side, so that you can contact them throughout the legislative session to express your opinion on what they're voting about. Well, speaking of sewers and swamps and not having any guts, we recently ran a Twitter poll with like 1,000 people, and we simply asked subscribers, and they're very much in the know. Like if you went to the gas station and you asked 100 people what happened in the legislature last year, Tim, I think maybe one or two could tell you anything. And
Yep.
every one of our subscribers can tell you darn near everything. Like they keep up, they're the news nerds. And we simply asked them, who could they get excited about for governor? And we asked, Cameron Sexton got 4%. I'm amazed he did so well. John Rose did 4%. Glenn Jacobs, 38%. And then this guy, Tim, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, Burchett, he got 52. And so I understand. I'll put together Congressman Desjardins' team when he beat Lincoln Davis. I ran his reelection campaign. I worked for Corker and a bunch of others in 13 different races that were all winners. Are you thinking about maybe run? I know you got to give the pat answer, but maybe the pat
Of course, I
answer with a
think
little bit of
about it.
hope.
Of course, I think about it. If I was younger, my ego would be busting right now with that. The reality is that I actually think that God wants me in Congress right now. I mean, that could change. God speaks to me, he just doesn't do it in an audible voice. I usually have to sweat it out. And I'm not, I've had, I put some thought into it, and sure, I've seen those polls, and I'm honored. I got somebody, my campaign manager, Thomas McAfee, and I were talking the other day, and we were laughing about how that we hadn't spent any money on this thing. We weren't even talking about running for governor yet. I'm winning the polls, and other people have spent a ton of money on this. They've got hired consultants, and they're traveling all over the place. Honestly, I think God has me in Washington where I need to be right now. And if that changes, I've got a little bit of time. You know that we're running out of time as well. I mean, you've got to start. If you want to run for Congress, Tennessee is a cigar shaped state, 95 counties. You can get to Canada from Tennessee faster than you can get from one end to the other if you're going diagonal. So I think I think people are talking about it, and I'll keep listening. How about that? I've got a lot of people.
That's good enough. That's as best as I could expect.
Yeah, I got a lot of
Uh,
people. I do have a lot of people from over there in your neck of the woods, though, that have been calling me, and they wear me out. Actually, there's one lady, Grace. She wears me out about 3 times a day with some other factor figure I need to be thinking about running for governor, and that people that the support. But we're going to
people
get
want
around the state regardless. I enjoy meeting folks. We've been meeting with a lot of folks all over the state, and actually I enjoy speaking to the dinners and women's groups and stuff all over the state. So if you know of any that are interested in having me come over, just give us a holler. We'll try to work it out.
I will. People just want something authentic. I mean, even if it's not perfect, that's why people like Trump. He, warts and all. And they also want somebody that will occasionally, uh, vociferously, with words, talk about issues that matter, and then actually put their neck out to vote that way and to ruffle feathers. And when people look across the landscape, conservatives don't find that very often, and folks are very worried. People run on you look at Bill Lee's 10 for 10 campaign promises. He made 10 campaign promises. I voted for every one of them. He has kept one of them and has made a lot of the other ones worse. And so people want somebody that will just say what they're going to do and then go up to Nashville and do it. I don't think the formula is very difficult. Before we close, what else is going on in Washington that people need to be aware of, looking at, anything like that? And I'll give you the last word because I know you've got another interview to go to.
Yeah, I apologize. We've got like 5 today. I told them keep it light over Christmas. And now I've got 5 interviews. Um, I, I I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank the great state of Tennessee. We are very fortunate, and there's reason that U-Haul has stated, at least the last couple of years, that we're the top recipient of U-Haul trucks because people aren't leaving Tennessee; they're moving here. And what I'm finding, at first I used to say all these folks moving here from LA and New York and Connecticut, they were changing us. But I got a little community down here, Lenore City, Loudon area. They live on the lake, a lot of them. They moved down here to get away from all that. And they tell me, and they're more conservative than I am. They scare me sometimes. I go to some of the meetings, I think, is this the NSA or SCIA setting me up or FBI with a question like this? Because they are so dadgum conservative and they know what they left and they're telling us we've got to keep what we've got. And I think that's a pretty cool situation. We do need to keep what we got. Every time you ask government for something else, they're going to take something to get it. They don't create anything. Everything they do, they take from somebody to get. And I think we forget that sometimes. And I would hope that we remember that and keep Tennessee a low tax state and keep them out of our dadgum business and federal government as well. We haven't the liberal media is quick to point out to me we haven't accomplished much this year, and I say, well, dadgum it, people in Tennessee would tell you we don't need any more dadgum laws. We need to just manage what we got, and and I'm of that belief too. If I had come home from Washington D.C. and said I have nothing to report, I would think that would be a very good year. So we need to remember that. Remember those folks that gave everything. I've got a 48-star flag in my office, and that was on my uncle's casket. And he died fighting the Nazis while my dad was off fighting the Japanese, and Mama flew an airplane during the Second World War. Those people sacrificed an incredible amount just for us to throw it away. And that's what we're doing right now. Every time we've got 15 or 20% of the population that goes to the polls. So let's get active. Let's stay involved. Let's question what's going on. And let's take our dadgum country back. And please pray for our country. And I hope everybody out there, and my Jewish friends, hope y'all have a very, very good Hanukkah. And my Christian buddies out there, hope y'all have a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Congressman Burchett. I appreciate you coming here. I know you're busy. And if there's ever anything that you want to sound the alarm on in the grassroots community, please let us know. Again, thank you.
I will. Let me ask you one quick question before we get off here. I got to go. My thing's lighting up here. But if people want to support you, how would they do that?
Oh, well, thanks. That's great. Just go to TennesseeConservativeNews.com/support. And we take folding money. We've got thousands of subscribers. Well, we got tens of thousands of subscribers, and we got, I don't know, 4 or 5,000 people that give to our organization since we started. And of course, we got the stalwarts, but just go to TennesseeConservativeNews.com/support. The only reason we can tell the truth is because we take no corporate advertising, and I don't get a paycheck from doing this. And so, and I make my money doing something else. And so I can completely tell the truth because we're 100% grassroots funded. So it's very liberating, but sometimes very frustrating. But
Yeah,
thank
that's,
you very much, Mr. Burchett.
thank you.
Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to hear from Congressman Burchett. Please keep us in mind for any future updates up in the Capitol, and go to TennesseeConservativeNews.com. Hit that subscribe button. We'll keep you in the know. Until next time, I'm Brandon Lewis, signing out.